All right, y'all. Look, this is big right here. What we got right here? What we got right here? This combination right here. This is big. We got the entire sports team right here on the Keep Prowling Podcast, and I'm excited. I can't wait to talk about these Carolina Panthers. And the reason I wanted Jeff Taylor, the Bahakel Sports Director, and my guy over here, Jack Taylor, who also works for Bahakel Sports, as you guys know, why I wanted these two guys on here was because they've been in the locker room. They've seen the ups, they've seen the downs, and I mean they've seen instant reaction after these games, and they've seen some of the jubilation after the wins. So I just, first off, I want to get into the conversation with you all and just, how was it all season long through the ups and the downs of what this Panthers season was?
I mean, I'll say it was fun. You know, it was fun to watch, you know, to have a team that was fun to cover, that was fun to, you know, see everything go through all season long. Even, you know, the beginnings of the year was rough. You know, the first couple home games against the Bengals and the Chargers. Even the Bengals game was a fun game. You know, the Chargers was pretty much the roughest game, to be honest, as far as, like, being in Bank of America Stadium. You know, the games throughout the year, like, in the past few years, it's been nothing. You know, like last year, the last game of the season at home against the Bucs, 9-0 loss, like, don't do anything. And then it was just, like, quiet and sadness and, like, it is what it is. But this year, it was fun every week, and that was really refreshing. Okay. And then for you, Jeff, I mean, what did you see anything different than he did, or did you catch a couple of different games that maybe he didn't, where you're like, you know, things are maybe on the uptick?
I think you saw, you know, you mentioned the highs and lows. So you saw the highs and lows. I think from the players, the thing that impressed me the most was Dave Canales. Talking about a glass half full. I mean, I don't know that his demeanor ever changed during a game. Yeah. I mean, it was, you know, he was smiling, he was energetic, he had a plan, and he wanted to see that plan. So he never wavered from that. He never wavered when he talked to the media. And I think the cool part is, even when they cleaned out their lockers this past Monday, you know, I had a chance to ask, you know, Bryce Young, you know, he seemed always on a, you know, up. He was always up. Mm-hmm. And Bryce said that's who he is, you know, 24/7. That doesn't change. That is who Dave Canales is. Dan Morgan said the same thing. The GM, when he talked, that is who Dave Canales is. So I think the cool part was there was some ups and downs. There were some rough waters. But at the end of the day, you know, I think the cool part for me was seeing Dave Canales, who really was just positive the whole time, and but honest also. Yeah. So I think that was cool.
And it makes you wonder too, like, you know, we talked about all season long patience, right? Being patient with this team, being patient with Bryce Young, being patient with this new regime that Dave Canales was trying to usher in. And the reason we said that was 2 games into the season, Bryce Young's benched, and the entire Carolina, the city of Charlotte's on fire at that point. Meaning it's trouble in paradise, right? It's trouble in paradise. And everybody's sitting here thinking, what in the world are the Panthers going to do? Do they have their guy? Is Dave Canales their guy? This defense couldn't stop anything. I mean, They couldn't stop it. They were water running through a faucet right now. Like that's what they were. And to see, you know, I talked to Jeff about this a couple weeks ago. I felt like we kind of got to see Dave Canales put his stamp on this team. They continued to grow into what he wanted them to be, what he wanted this organization to be, and the patience of not firing him 4 or 5 games into the season when it looks rough, when it looks at its worst, when the fans are saying this guy's got to go. And for, you know, can we quickly give a shout out to Dave Tepper? Can I?
Okay.
Can I?
If you want.
He kept his hands out of the pot a little bit.
He did.
He let the 2 guys he hired, he let them do their job. For better or for worse, he let them do it. And I think
he might have had some moments
he might have did, but we didn't see him.
Right.
You know, we didn't see none of the dumpster fire of what last year was, especially late in the season, when you don't know who your guy is. People are talking about C.J. Stroud. Now, it helps when Caleb Williams doesn't play as well. It helps when C.J. Stroud's offensive line is not as good as it was last year. Those things help because now there's not as much comparison sake going on.
Right.
And I think that's another big portion of it is everybody else wasn't playing well either.
No.
There weren't a lot of quarterbacks putting the world on the storm. I mean, who could have predicted Sam Darnold putting the world, you know, just completely doing what he did this year and leading them to as close as you can get to a division title without having the division title.
Right.
I think the more hurtful one was probably Jaden Daniels. Like, another situation where, and it could be just that rookie sensation like the Texans were last year, but nothing about the Commanders screamed a put-together organization with a culture that's built and put in place, with new head coach and new, leadership, new ownership up top. Of course, they got a pretty good GM coming out of San Francisco when they got him, and that was one that a lot of Panthers fans were clamoring for. But no, I think that you definitely saw a bit more of it was like when you talk about his like what Dave Canales wanted for the team, it wasn't even so much like on the field per se, it's more so just off the field. Like you really could tell that they were buying into just like, don't ever let up any game. I mean, there was not a single game outside of really the Saints game at the beginning of the year and then the Cowboys game midway through the year where they were really out of that game from an early point in time. I mean, every game, even if they were letting up a lot of points, they were going back and forth. And that positivity kind of shone through from both Bryce and from Dave Canales. And I think Dave Canales really came into his – I think the perfect storm was when he started to – like when Bryce came back in, he had already been kind of teetering on it and, the car crash happened and that will forever be a question mark, But Bryce had come in even in that Denver game, halfway through, played a really good game and said, all right, it was a pointless – couple of minutes of football, but he was playing really well. Yeah. So I think at the beginning of the season, Dave did not trust Bryce Young at all. And I don't think Bryce Young trusted himself or the offensive line. I think he was still shell-shocked from last year. Yeah. And so I think Bryce taking that time, sticking with it, Dave was able to open up the playbook a lot more because the playbook that he was using the first few weeks was night and day from what he was using even with Andy Dalton the next few weeks. Mm-hmm. And then that was even more different than what Dave Canales was using in the second, iteration of Bryce's season. It was, and that you saw that in the culmination against Atlanta. That was one of the best, called games I've ever seen from Dave Canales. It's one of the best called games offensively that I've seen, and best performances offensively since, in a long time for the Panthers.
Yeah, and I mean, I think too, like we saw, and stop me if I'm wrong. You all out there, stop me if I'm wrong as well. But we saw some guys step up that maybe we weren't expecting. I don't know if I expected this type of season from Chuba Hubbard. I don't know if I expected this type of season from Jalen Coker, who came, who started to find his way as the season went along. Adam Thielen, I think we knew what to expect from Adam Thielen, but once he got back healthy, he once again became that guy again, right? The same guy he's always been. And, even kind of like we talked about before with Bryce Young, we saw. I feel like his smile never really wavered, right? Like even when he was benched, he was on the sideline joking, messing with Andy Dalton.
He was the first person out on the field after something good happened.
Yeah.
To congratulate people.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. And I think like even him not wavering through that storm and understanding that you got to go through some things to get to where you want to be. And I mean, like you said before, not only was the play calling night and day, but just Bryce Young's confidence in his play was night and day. Like watching him, especially, in Week 18 and even before that, watching him put together some of the games that he put together was like, this is the guy we want. That's the guy.
Yeah, and I think, when you mentioned Chuba Hubbard, I think the gist is, I think Dave Canales always had a plan, but like Jack said, he couldn't open up a playbook a whole lot. But I think as the season went along, as a head coach, he understood what he has in Chuba Hubbard. He's got a guy he can run, and we talked about it all the time. You run a guy 25 times. Near the end of the game, you wear people down, in his yards after contact and stuff. So I think, Chuba is not, a name you're going to put up there with the Derrick Henrys and stuff like that. But he just had that season where you realized what role he played in the offense. Yeah. And it helped Bryce Young, I think, tremendously to have that. And then, to have the weapons start to come to life a little bit when you mentioned Coker and stuff like that, or Thielen to, rely on. I think as it went along, I think Chuba Hubbard was a big part of the success of how this offense came together. Mm-hmm. And kudos to Dave Canales, too. I want to throw one more point out there is the fact that, I don't know, you can help me, Jack, it was like one of the worst seasons for a defense.
It was the worst season in NFL history
for a defense.
They were 534 points let up in the year.
Okay.
And that was one more point than the who had the record for the most points. It was 533 was the record.
Right.
We now own that defense owns the record for the most points let up in a game. All right, let up in a season.
But the interesting part is that something that just I didn't know until like the last until it was done. Not the true Panther, you guys over there, yeah. But for Dave Canales to keep that all together when at the beginning of the year everybody's like, this offense is a crap show. What's going on? Let's bench Bryce. You have people going, he's not an NFL starter and stuff like that. To somehow or another keep that, plate full and keep it moving forward and stuff like that. But also you have that D who obviously gave up all these points to keep that ship afloat. And even, like I said, when they cleaned out their lockers on Monday, even, when you ask the defensive guys about Dave Canales, they believe in him and they believe in what he's doing.
Yeah.
So I think, you as a head coach, you could completely lose that locker room, or you could have had a lot of dissent between the offense and the defense.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think Monday walking out of that, when Jack and I walked out of there after we had talked to a lot of the players, clean out their lockers, that is a team that was excited. There was energy in that room, and you figure it's Monday, it's raining, they're going to close out the season, they're packing up everything. Kudos to them.
It was one of the best Monday feelings you could probably see in terms of and especially the stark contrast from the year before, where it was just it was like a funeral leaving there.
Yeah.
But I think for Canales, he definitely had every opportunity. He had the big opportunity, and we talked. Dan Morgan mentioned it. We always said we'll have the question about who made that final decision, where did it came from. But Dan said him and Dave and Brant Tillis sat down, had a meeting at the very end, and said to Dave, you're the rookie head coach. You got to live or die on this decision. Are you willing to do that? If you make it and it goes south, are you willing to either, bite the bullet, say you were wrong and change it, or are you, then going to stand by your decision regardless? And so they said, the final, hey, we're going to bench Bryce came from Dave Canales. And I think, for me, the biggest bright spot, you talk about Chuba, you talk about the weapons on offense and everything. But for me, the biggest bright spot and the biggest surprise, I'd say, was Dan Morgan. I mean, I was on the fence about it as a hire. He was around for the Scott Fitterer regime. We didn't know as much about the connection with Dave Canales when he was hired. We found out a lot more about it after the fact in the time they spent in Seattle. He'd been with Seattle, been with Buffalo, saw how it worked there, and then came here, and if he had, and that was the thing, is if he hadn't had any interaction with the Fitterer organization, it might have been okay, well, that's fine, bring him in. But it felt okay, is this just a feel-good hire with having your former, linebacker come to be now your GM? But for him, as a team, they played more players than anybody else in the NFL. They played more players throughout the entire year, both offense and defense. I mean, you had a rotating cast of characters on the defensive side of the ball, which you put yourself in that hole because you traded away and let go of every defensive, player to get weapons for Bryce this year and last year. Now, Dan might not have done it. Fitterer did a good amount of it, but, not able to re-sign Frankie or Jeremy Chin or even, your Turgos Matos, losing those guys had a huge impact on the defense. But I think for Dan Morgan, we talk about, and we can, if you want to talk about it, we can talk about it, the rookie class, shot for shot. I mean, every single one of them had impact, from Charles Smith-Wade, even to trade Michael Barrett and a pick to get Mike Jackson coming in for the cornerbacks. But then also, on the defensive side of the ball, he had a good amount of hits when it came to free agents in terms of Mike Jackson, A'Shawn Robinson, Josie Jewell. When they were healthy and able to play, they were firing on all cylinders. And then especially offensively, I mean, every one of the free agents he brought in on the offensive side of the ball, from David Moore to Robert Hunt to Damian Lewis, and then bringing back Cade Mays off the practice squad to fill in, having what he had to do. I just think that, for me, Dave Canales, I had reservations with throughout the year, but I think he's got something good going. Ejiro Vero has a lot of question marks as the defensive coordinator, but Dan Morgan, for me, I put the most trust in him now. Made a couple big splashes in free agency last year. The draft, outside of Jonathan Brooks, really fired on all cylinders. So to have as many picks as we have, and to have, now we got 21 free agents, but I'm really excited about what Dan and Brant Tillis have together.
Yeah, and I think too, I think we have to be careful too with putting the blame of what Jonathan Brooks, his injury issues.
Yeah, I mean, has
become. I mean, obviously we saw what he could be.
Yeah.
Right. He showed it every time he got the ball. You were okay, this guy.
Yeah,
could be,
he was explosive.
And just one of those unfortunate situations, for all involved. And I think exactly like you said. I think I had a little bit more belief in Dan Morgan, based off of the guys he was bringing in.
Yeah.
I think, I believed in Josie Jewell, and I believed in, A'Shawn Robinson and these guys, and the offensive line. And I think at times, and I can probably say this for a lot of Panthers fans out there, there was times where you might have believed in some guys and you had to eat your words throughout the year, right? I was very high on Bryce Young, especially after a pretty good preseason. I was very high on Bryce Young, and then he gets benched 2 weeks into the season, and I'm sitting here like, what was I thinking? Am I really right about this? Do I need to pack this show up and go home?
And that's what I'll say about, Dan Morgan and Dave Canales is we saw throughout the year, in years past and in Panthers, different organizations, they were they held on to a lot of guys for a lot longer than they should have, especially in the Matt Rule era, guys that really did not need to be a part of the football team. But we saw, like after the Bucs game, the one in Carolina, and Dane Jackson wasn't on the field the next week. He was gone off the field, and Dan and Dave have been if you're not contributing, if you're not what we need, pack your bags, you're gone. And that's came from at the beginning of the year, and then even down to Deontay Johnson, Jonathan Mingo, Terrace Marshall, we don't need you. You're not contributing.
And what have they done since?
Exactly. I mean, you got the best out of Deontay, but even Deontay, that was at the time was a splash. That was all right, that's a fire trade. It looked, and then even a few weeks into the year, it looked incredibly even. Dante Jackson was performing, Deontay Johnson was performing, and he kept his head on straight. And there's questions about what his demeanor, how much impact that had in the Bryce Young benching situation, and then how that worked out. But I think that they're very, very cut and dry. If you're not doing it, we don't need you. And so I think you're going to see that this year with the 21 free agents that they have when it comes to guys. I mean, and there's some big names: Mike Jackson, Shaq Thompson, Andy Dalton, Ian Thomas, the whole special teams. It's going to be
interesting to see how the next couple months play out.
Yeah.
With the free agents, because and listen, Dan Morgan, and Dave Canales, 1 year under their belts.
Yeah.
And seem to be very cohesive.
Oh yeah.
Two things, and so they've got their work cut out there.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're going to have to. And I'll ask you two guys, I'll pose this question because I was a little stunned, but not, I don't know. Monday when he was asked about Evero, he didn't blink.
Yeah, that was
surprising.
It
was Evero as our defensive coordinator, moving forward.
It was surprising.
And I think there was this audible kind of silence almost.
There was.
In the room, if you can talk about an audible silence. But, so I think, good move. And then I guess my second thing is, we know that GM coach, I've never realized it more how important that relationship is.
It really is.
And I go back to, and DJ knows I do this and Jack knows I'll do it too, but I go back to when Mike Vrabel and John Robinson sat in a room for the Titans and got rid of A.J. Brown.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember Mike Vrabel's face.
Yeah.
Which was basically the entire demise of a football team.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious to see, now that year one is done, how it progresses to year two, when some tough decisions need to be made, especially when we talk about free agents. You talk about Shaq, and you talk about is Adam?
Adam is not, but he could. He pulls a retirement. I mean,
right.
He said, he said the same protocol the last few years. Adam, I said, was surprising for me because he played really well last year. Injury, I thought, okay, it's probably, but then he came out looking almost. He played better.
Yeah,
he played better this year than he did last year.
Yeah. But is Evero a good move?
That's what I was going to ask.
Because a year ago, people were talking about him being a head coach. Last year when vacancies were, people were interviewing him.
And it was diminished from when Evero after Avero's when we brought we interviewed Evero for a head coaching gig,
right?
And that was the big wow, we brought in 3 guys on our squad that we had hired. That was the whole okay, we're gonna have an insane coaching staff with this master class they put together of what Frank Reich had. When you were able to bring in 2 or 3 other guys that were in your lists, your short list when it came to Jim Caldwell, Jero Evero, you were looking to see, all right, now let's get them into head coaching positions. And I think that because it's also very rare that Azero had a couple still straggling offers because of the momentum I think from that first season, and then in the second year from the momentum of what he had before he came to Carolina, there's some still stragglers that first year because you didn't know, all right, well, is it just the offense isn't performing? Is it just it's his first season? This year was crickets. Was crickets, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
And it was very weird because you very rarely do you see a new head coach in Canales come in and not clean house completely.
Right.
There was some coordinator changes, obviously, and there was some some assistant coach changes, and position coaches, but to leave your defensive coordinator there.
Yeah.
And I think that had to come directly from Dan Morgan.
That's what I'm wondering.
He'd been there in the building the year before.
Right.
When Evero was there, he saw
defensive guy.
I mean, yeah, he's a defensive guy. And so I think even this year, I think that still came from Dan Morgan because, we talked about it, the minute Robert Salah got fired, you thought, okay, well, they're buddy-buddy.
Right.
You know, you've already got your GM and head coach are best friends. You know, they're really good. They're really familiar with each other. Bring him in. And then even to see, couldn't have seen the 2020, hindsight, but, then to see the defensive group that going to be coming out now with, guys like Gerard Mayo could be, a defensive coordinator. Steve Wilkes still in the fray.
Right.
Some other guys that, you could really run for defensive coordinator. For me, I think, again, Dan Morgan said the same thing, give it some time.
Right.
Aguero's had this consistent, not excuse, but asterisk where he hasn't been able to play his system with his full, with the tank on full.
Right.
It's been depleted. It's been egregious.
Yeah.
But then it's also coming from, you as a coordinator, one of the biggest things that we were, happy about with you and why we even wanted you as head coach was that you had played in all these different systems with these great guys in the Rams and you were and in Denver, and you could bring some of those free agents here. You kind of did it last year. You did it that first year definitely, and then you draft your guy in DJ Johnson, but then you said, okay, well, you bring in Josie Jewell, Ashawn Robinson, Deshaun Williams, and they kind of pan out. So but this next year, okay, but then you see Ernest Jones, he leaves the Rams and he goes to the Titans. Why couldn't you have brought Ernest, make the call to Ernest Jones? You were in the Super Bowl with him, you got that familiarity with him. Or you go to Denver, Patrick Surtain's coming off a rookie contract, same as JC. Can you not make a play there? Or even just outside of some of the other players that they have in, when Bradley Chubb leaves, you couldn't have made a call to Bradley Chubb. We couldn't have tried to throw him some money some way when we know we're losing Brian Burns. I think Aguero, I was genuinely shocked when they made it that quickly, because of just, the amount of points that were put
right.
in. And not even the amount of points, because that's one thing. The lack of communication on the field, the lack of just if you can't get guys to come in and play a basic defensive system, that's a real issue. And
right.
you can't, tackling is one thing.
Right.
Not being able to, not having the guys in there, but if they can't tackle, what are you doing during the week?
Right.
And so that's where I was a bit concerned
Miffed.
and a bit,
right.
All right, but then this is your last year. And then if you're going to do that now, from Dan's perspective, if you're going to keep Aguero, then you better load up.
Right.
On defensive
you better get
picks
some
in the
people in
draft,
place. Right.
Defensive free agents. It better be Matt Rule's first season in that draft, and we went, the first NFL draft
was
of all defensive players. Mm-hmm. You better do that again. And then not only that, but in free agency as well, because your offense outside of depth doesn't really need that many more weapons. You've seen what you've done with depleted wide receiver group and depleted tight end group. Now, if Adam Thielen retires, that's a much different story. And with Jonathan Brooks probably not being able to play until 2026, if we're being honest, it's a bit of a different story.
Go get T. Higgins.
But, so that's where I go with Aguero. The buck stops here. And you better put in work this offseason.
Right.
Yeah, and I think the hope is Adam Thielen comes back. Of course, you got Chuba. Obviously, you grab a guy that adds some depth to him, unless you want to stick with the Miles Sanders experiment, but I don't see that happening.
He had a great game in Atlanta.
Yeah.
He's gone through a lot.
Yeah.
It's the contract. He's still got 2 years on that contract, and
you think
anybody?
He may restructure? Because I don't know how much value he has elsewhere.
That's the thing. You're not going to get anybody to eat that contract, and there's not that many running back desperate, especially in a running back such a running back heavy draft that you've got this year. Mm-hmm. You've got 5-6 guys that are going to be pretty apparent. So he has no value really. So restructuring would be a good decision, I think, for him. And especially coming off the injury, it's a bit easier to do that. Mm-hmm. So that's where I'm hoping they kind of go with that. Because, I don't we need a running back at some point, but, because you don't want to wear Chuba down.
Yeah.
But it's not something I want to spend a high draft pick or any free agency money on, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. I think, kind of like he said, I think your best bet is to build this defense similarly to how you built this offense last year.
Yeah.
It took about a year to build the offense that you wanted to get. It took some time for schematically to get everything right.
Yeah.
Right? And mentally, confidence-wise, cohesion-wise to get these things right. But I think, I would like to see Evero with a good cast of guys defensively because, kind of like you said, last year felt like it was injuries more than anything. And then this year, probably similar such. And,
losing Shaq and Derek Brown the beginning of the year was brutal. And then you say, that's been the asterisk because in the year before, you lose JC, you lose Brian Burns, and you lose Shaq again. Mm-hmm. And then you lose Frankie halfway through. You really had lost a lot of guys. But, then you saw flashes of some other people. So I think it's a matter of, I think it's where, it's really important. I think it's the best part is that Bryce doesn't have to learn a new offense in the offseason.
Right, absolutely.
That's huge.
Listen, that's enormous to have the stability. And they, we talked about it on Monday again when they were there, talking about the stability.
Yeah.
I don't know that the Panthers have really. When was the last time they went into an offseason with that much stability?
I mean, we've been exempt from Hard Knocks, the last however many years because you had a first-year head coach, so you weren't
Right.
going to be in it.
Right.
Now they're actually a candidate for it. It's the Seahawks, the Titans, the Panthers, and I think Washington, I believe, are the candidates.
So if the Titans get Shador or Cam, it'll probably be
more than likely. But I think, so because of that, though, I still think, when it comes to retention in terms of those 21 free agents, it's a big list.
That's a huge list.
And they're big. Austin Corbett,
Yeah.
Brady Christensen, your entire safety room is a free agent.
Yeah.
From Jordan Fuller all the way to Lonnie Johnson, they're all free agents. Mike Jackson, who had a really big year, Johnny Hecker, Eddie Pinheiro, and J.J. Jansen.
Yep, all three
of them. Like I said, Shaq Thompson, Deshaun Williams. Luckily, they locked in JC's 5th year, so that's something we don't have to worry about. Tommy Tremble, Andy and Thomas are both, free agents. So I think as far as retention goes, I would like to see a lot more retention on the offensive side of the ball. Andy Dalton is another free agent as well. Keeping the guys on the offense. I mean, Corbett, you don't know, and I hope they draft a center in the draft. Brady Christensen, I think, needs to be an automatic, and he's going to test the market out because he showed this year that he can play guard.
Well, you even heard it in his voice on Monday. You could tell by his answers. He was like...
And he played guard. He played center. In one game, he played both. I mean, he was a huge piece for the offensive line that really needed a lot of help. And so I think that's the biggest thing is, retaining the offensive line because it was night and day different for Bryce. I mean, to the point where I think he saw that when Andy went out on the field and wasn't getting ripped to shreds every play, that he goes, okay, wait, I can play behind. Because, week 2, he loses Corbett. And there goes your center, and Ickey wasn't really good the first beginning. Damian Lewis wasn't even playing those first few weeks. Ickey was iffy the first few weeks. So then by the time he comes back, Lewis is healthy, Hunt is healthy. Ickey's playing a lot better. Moton's Moton, and then they're just shuffling around, Christensen and Cade Mays whenever they need to. And so that's where, offensively, though, you retain David Moore, you retain Andy Dalton, you retain, these guys to keep your, Tommy Tremble, to keep your system in work. You cut out where you don't need it. For the defensive guys, pretty much all of them could go, in my opinion, outside of Shaq Thompson and Mike Jackson. I think really Mike Jackson had a huge season as a number 2, especially while JC was playing in his most healthy year and got to a Pro Bowl. So that's huge for him. And just to see that JC Horn was the guy they drafted him to be, and all that discourse of his, they should have gone for Pat Surtain or what yada yada yada, didn't really plan out. So. I think, shoring up another defensive tackle to help out Derek Brown, really I think you go after a huge free agent on the defensive side of the ball, in my opinion. Outside of wide receiver would be nice. I'd rather go for a star linebacker, in my opinion.
Okay, I like that. I want to ask you real quick about your Titans. How do you feel about the first overall pick?
Don't blow it. Listen, I think the interesting part was I would have sat here at the beginning of the year and said Will Levis is an NFL quarterback, Bryce Young isn't. And now I can completely flip that around. So if you have no quarterback on your roster that you have any trust in, and I don't with Will Levis, and Mason Rudolph is a good backup.
Yeah.
That's it. And you're building a new stadium, and you have zero kind of – if you keep Tyler Boyd and you keep the receiver –
Burks?
Calvin Ridley.
Oh yeah, Calvin Ridley. Yeah.
And listen, Tony Pollard was second in the AFC in rushing.
Yeah.
And you kind of keep those guys, and Chigaquanko is playing great at tight end. And you get some D, you got to. Yeah. But then the question is, is Cam Ward and Shador Sanders going to be another Jameis Winston and Vince Young?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are you not Vince Young? Marcus.
Yeah.
Although Marcus, God bless him.
Yeah.
Marcus is balling. Now, I'll be honest. We'll talk all day. He's a free agent. Go get him.
You're better off trying to get back Malik Willis and get him back.
I know, but Malik took that shot the other day in the game. But go. I think if
you're the Titans, you do what they.
Or you trade. And I think you got to see what happens in the free agency. If Justin Fields, what are the Steelers going to do?
Yeah.
If Russell becomes a free agent, do you go after Russell Wilson for 2 years?
Yeah.
Maybe. Mm-hmm. And then go get yourself, and then trade away your picks.
Yeah.
And, trade that one and get. So I think it all depends on a lot of stuff, but Rand Carthen got fired, the GM.
Yeah.
And he brought in Calvin Ridley and Tyler Boyd and Tony Pollard and.
But he also didn't re-sign Derrick Henry.
I know. Well, but and you've got and then our defensive side of the ball. Who was the guy from Kansas City?
Oh,
the corner.
Cornerback, yeah, I can't remember.
JC?
No, isn't it?
Ladarius Sneed?
Ladarius Sneed,
yeah.
yeah. Like, I mean, he played one game, and he was hurt the rest of the time.
Yeah.
So
you bring in Ernest Jones, he plays 2 games,
and then
he's gone.
Yeah.
You trade him away. You trade away Malik Willis for nothing, and
Right.
then he goes and keeps
And
the
balls
Packers
out.
afloat.
And beats us.
Yeah, he keeps
Yeah.
the Packers afloat. I mean, I was more surprised. I didn't see the firing for the head coach coming for Callahan. I thought the GM going a little bit.
Well, I think the interesting part, too, is you got to, and the interesting part is, and this goes back to everything else, if you're a Panther fan, and what you've seen with Bryce Young this year, you got to feel good. But as we've talked about many times, the quarterbacks are horrible. They're not horrible, but I'm just saying.
This is not the year for it.
Not even that. I'm talking in the NFL itself. There's 5 or 6 good quarterbacks. And to me, the rest are like.
I mean, I think.
Or at least half the league could take a quarterback right now.
I think, the situation with Anthony Richardson really helped Bryce's the view of that situation. You could see, okay, it could have gone much worse.
Oh,
Bryce
I mean, right.
Bryce never benched himself in a game, and then, Joe Flacco comes in and plays like, okay, we don't even need to worry about you this year.
And C.J. Stroud, all the
injuries
was
there.
A sophomore slump. I mean,
the injuries to never having all their wideouts healthy at the same time.
I think Cam Ward. We go back though. I think Cam Ward will be the number 1 pick.
If I'm the Titans, I do what they were saying the Patriots should do: try to trade to get the number 2 pick, like trade next year's number 1, get 1 and 2 in a row, draft Shadur and Travis Hunter back to back, and then hire Dion as your head coach.
No, I don't want Dion.
It worked for the Texans.
No, I'd bring in Dion as Dion as our GM.
I don't know if that's better or worse. He might try to do both.
I don't want Dion though.
He might try to do both. He might try to pull a Belichick.
But the 1 and 2 might be cool.
I mean, or that for the Titans. To be honest, you trade back. You pull a Bears, you wait, you trade.
But
for
I don't want
to.
I think you got too many talented people on offense, not to have a quarterback that can get him the ball and play well.
See, I think if you trade back and someone will be back in the first round, you pick up Ashton Genty. And then get another great Titan running back. Pollard's he's good, or at least get the 1-2 punch of the two of them.
Right.
Because
but Tajay Spears played solid ball.
He did, but I mean to get a guy like Ashton Genty.
Yeah, I know.
Because the receiver, you don't want a receiver in this first round because they're not none of them.
And if we keep who we got, I don't think we need to.
Yeah, and then defensively, there's a lot of holes.
The best the best receiver we have probably is Westbrook Akine.
Yeah, 100%. And he's going to look for some money too.
I know. Anyway, on we go.
Yeah, I think it's going to definitely be an interesting offseason for everyone involved. Let's jump into the playoffs a little bit. We're going to give a pretty big picture. We'll pick the games this week, and then we'll give a pretty big picture of what we think the rest of the playoffs will look like. Since this will probably be my last show of the through the offseason.
Probably.
But I mean, I had to make it a big one.
Of course.
So, so starting off with Saturday, we got the Chargers at the Texans.
I think, and this was why I was really high on Jim Harbaugh and wanting to, I was really wanting him to come to Carolina. You talk about instant culture set, it was him or Mike Vrabel. That's immediate culture that he brought in, and you see what's happening in LA. They lose, J.K. Dobbins goes out, I think he just came back in, you bring in him and Gus, and then the wide receivers are nothing. They have no wide receivers to speak of. It's a law firm every week. Their defense is playing like their defense finally was supposed to be playing.
Right.
With Khalil Mack, with the guys that they have, on that squad. And he's just turned it around night and day and made, people will remember, Herbert's been quiet, but you realize, it's not, end of the world. So, with the way the Texans have been, I don't see the Texans overtaking the Chargers. I go Chargers. Okay.
I'm going to go Texans. I think it's going to be a close one. I think it's going to be like a dogfight to the end.
Yeah.
I just think the Texans get the ball last and they win.
I just think there's so many injuries on that squad.
I could understand that though.
I'm gonna go. I think the Chargers. I'm gonna go with what Jack said or whatever to a point, but I think they're the sleeper team in the AFC. I really the way that defense can ball out.
Until you need Quentin Johnston to win you a game.
Huh?
Until you need Quentin Johnston to win you a game.
That's the problem. You need what's his face? The other one, Josh Palmer.
But I just think I think the Chargers win. Yes.
Okay. Steelers at the Ravens.
You can never count out Mike Tomlin, and for whatever reason, it's the same thing as It's the same thing as Carolina and Atlanta or Titans and Texans. You know, it's a rivalry game is always going to be, especially even in the playoffs. I mean, and we've seen this matchup how many times in the playoffs? You know, Ravens Steelers in the last decade. I mean, it's been the wild card more often than not, if not the last week of the season. And I think there was one year where it was literally the last week of the season and then the wild card the next week. And I think it was Lamar's. One of his first playoff games was against the Steelers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I know he put the Chargers his first year.
Yeah.
Well, because Lamar hasn't really been able to face the Steelers when they've actually been good. This is
that's true.
That's the first time they've actually been decent.
But the Ravens have, you know, and so I think I give it to the Ravens. It's going to be a close one. It's going to take Lamar having a master class. I give it to the Ravens though. I believe in Mike Tomlin. I don't believe in the rest of the team for the Steelers.
Yeah, I could understand that, especially with George Pickens and what he's doing. You never know. What you thinking?
I'm gonna go Ravens. I think it's if the Ravens, you got to step up.
Yeah.
And the Steelers have played horrible down the stretch.
Yeah.
I mean, horrible. I mean, I remember 5 weeks ago somebody asked Mike Tomlin in a post game about, well, it's one loss, and he said something like that's not a snowball or something like that, and they lose the next 4.
Yeah.
And you talk about culture and stuff like that. And to the other Harbaugh. Run the ball.
Yeah.
If you don't give it to Derrick Henry 25 times in this game,
I agree.
you should be fired the next day.
And the weather and but they literally just played basically a playoff game for, you know, Cincinnati.
Right.
Ravens didn't bench anybody. Lamar played the whole game.
Yeah.
Derrick played the whole game.
Yeah.
Cincinnati was playing for their lives.
Right.
Couldn't get it done. You know, and I think that's where you see. But with the Steelers, you know, they just kind of they.
I think they're in a free fall. Yeah. But if you're the Ravens, this is the game you need to go out, quiet the noise, and go win.
I think this could be the start of a potential career-defining playoff run for the Ravens for Lamar. Well,
it's this year.
This is the kill of the narrative.
He can't go out and throw. He can't go out and have 3 INTs on the day.
I agree.
And you know whatever.
I think they got to play the cleanest game they play all season long.
Yeah,
because we saw the Ravens versus the Steelers first time. Derrick Henry fumbles. Ravens spiral out of control and they can't win that game.
Yeah.
But when they came out the second time and they played a practically perfect game.
Yeah.
They beat him by 20?
They beat him by 17.
31, 31-14 or something.
So it's like it's right there for you. I mean, just get out of your own way and like you said,
run the ball.
They have to run the ball. That's been the biggest issue with the Ravens.
I mean, if you went out and made that move during the offseason.
You made it for a reason.
And you did it for a reason, then do it.
And this is the perfect game to let Derrick Henry just take over and save your guys for next week because, everybody knows Ravens Steelers the next week is always tough.
But that D, though, the Steelers D, they
lost to get him out of their guy. You know,
I know.
Losing Patrick Queen to flip the. I mean, that was the biggest move I thought for the Ravens.
Yeah.
Was flipping that around. But I think it'll be a big game for them. But yeah, it'll be a fun watch.
Yeah, I think so too. A good way to start that Saturday of playoff football. So moving into Sunday, we got the Broncos at the Bills.
Ooh, I mean, you know, it's been a great thing to see. You know, it's been a cool little story. I mean, it's the Bills. You know, I could see them even, you know, playing Josh Allen just the first half, to be honest, and then letting, you know, I mean.
Wow, really?
The Broncos, I don't think have played a defense like the Bills. Now, the defense has had its moments, or had to play an offense like the Bills. You know, they've been in shootouts. We've seen them. And I think that, you know, Bo Nix is showing that all that time in college really paid off.
Right, yeah.
But I just, it's the Bills. I mean, I can't, unless, you know, it's a huge just like cough and hiccup for the Bills. They haven't really had, you know, they've played their games. I don't see how the Bills lose the game.
Yeah, I honestly think the Bills, because and I'm going to let y'all stew on this a little bit too. I have the question, what team do you think is kind of set up for disappointment? They've had a good season. They looked good. But,
definitely the Bills.
You know,
yeah.
That's what I was about to say. I think for me, it's the Bills. I think the Bills are set up to disappoint. I think the Lions on the other side are set up to disappoint. That's for me, and I think the Bills are going to lose this game.
Oh,
it's close.
I think it'll be a lot closer than what people think. I think, you know, what Sean Payton has done with that offense has been impressive. Mm-hmm. I think the Bills get it done, but I wouldn't be surprised to see it be a good ball game and to be good playoff football. The interesting part about the wild card games is you always get 3 that are just horrible, and then you get one good one.
I don't know.
But this has all the makings of being a great weekend of football.
Like you saying any given Sunday, but as we keep going down the list, I think this might be one of the most like evenly matched wild card groupings we've seen in some time.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you talked about the first out, like the Broncos Bills. That's the only one where I really have a surefire like they're gonna win. 'Cause, the other one, I mean, Steelers Ravens, Texans Chargers. Like that's the only one, and then we'll go down the rest of the list. That's the only one I'm incredibly confident about that one. The rest of them, they're toss ups in my opinion.
And as for y'all too mentioned it or whatever, to me, I'll say it. I know nobody's going to believe it or whatever. I think the Chiefs are set up for a letdown.
Oh, no, they are.
That's
I think that I think they could easily lose their first game.
They definitely could.
And I think it could easily happen. So I think the Chiefs, on the other side of the ball, and we'll talk about it in a minute, is I'm going to say it. I think the Eagles.
Okay. Yeah,
I think the Eagles stand a chance of not even getting past this weekend.
I mean, let's talk about that game. I mean, I do see that when the Packers are hot, they are scary.
Yeah.
When they're not, like you saw with the Bears,
right?
And they weren't trying their hardest, I think, in that one. But it was a dumpster fire in that one. So I think that this is a big trap game for the Eagles. If
AJ and them don't connect and things get a little, what's going on at the beginning of that game, and things don't go quite to plan, I think I'm actually going with I think Green Bay gets it done. I think Green Bay goes in and wins.
I like
they have to stop Saquon though. That's the biggest thing.
That's gonna be hard.
I know, and I still don't. I would, and let me just back up on that or whatever. I thought it was ridiculous that they didn't play Saquon.
No, I think
and let him get his and become the all-time leading rusher in a season,
especially
against the team. He could have had 200 yards against the Giants in the first quarter.
I think
or first half.
I think that's all.
And I know you don't want to get him hurt,
but I think when you're chasing history,
go.
I'm always go for it. You got one. You got
one shot.
You
got one shot. Go.
If a win would have gotten them a better seed, I would have seen them doing it. I see why because really, if you're being honest,
now it wouldn't
your whole team right now.
But it wouldn't surprise me though if who is it? Sirianni?
Yeah.
If he might have gone to Barkley and Saquon Barkley and said, "What do you want to do?"
Oh yeah, I could easily
Saquon could have said, "Listen, let's do the Super Bowl run and let's go."
He's really like their main person right now. If he's not, if you lock him down, then you can have a chance to beat them.
Yeah.
If they were in a more comfortable position, I think they.
And is Jordan Love good to go?
That's the.
I mean, he's still he's out. He had a concussion, right? Is that what it was?
I think he'll be fine.
Right.
But with Saquon, I think it's a matter of and also it was going to have an asterisk on it anyway. With the new. With an extra week in the year, it was going to be all right. Well, he had it at 18. Dickerson had it.
Right, I know.
So, but I do agree. I thought it was wild. That other one you saw. What's your pick for that one? You said
I'm gonna go Packers because I think like you said, I think when the Packers are on, they're on. And I think the Packers have shown time and time again to be really impressive.
Yeah.
I don't know what I mean. It's crazy, and I said this a couple times, but Jordan Love, he plays like Aaron Rodgers. Like when you watch him play,
it's so aggravating that they were able to get. That
it's crazy.
It was so aggravating they really gave it, and that was where I had said like last year when we talked to connect back to Bryce, I was very big about even last year when we drafted him, sit him. You sign Andy Dalton, let Andy Dalton play for the rest of the year, play through the year, and then let Bryce develop because that's what they got with Jordan Love. Jordan Love out of college was a huge question mark. He didn't have the time frame that everybody else had. He didn't have the games that everybody else had playing in the team and in the area that he played for. They sit Jordan Love for the year, and then he has a little bit and now he's looking like okay, they've got their franchise guy,
right.
And they can just go right down the line from Favre to Rodgers to Jordan Love without a gap in between.
Yeah.
And that's ridiculous. And so Jordan Love's playing, and especially with the wide receiver group that they have, where you don't have a true number one, and it's really just a wide receiver by committee.
Yeah.
And then you lose Aaron Jones and Jacobs comes in, and it's like, it is what it is.
And they lost who did they lose last week? Watson.
Yeah, but even that, so Watson goes down, then you get, Jaden Reed pops off,
right?
Or Dontavian Wicks goes off. Like you don't need, or if all that. Then Tucker Kraft has a good game. Like they don't have a true number one anywhere on that team outside of Jordan Love. So I think it'll be a toss up though. I really do think.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a good one. You had something to
say? The next one. Yeah.
Yeah. Commanders at Buccaneers. I think. That's a tough one. I might have to think about that one for a minute.
It's incredibly. It's all on. It's the Bucs game to lose.
I agree.
Meaning that if depending upon which Bucs come out, if it was the Bucs that the Panthers played 2 weeks back, then they win that game. If it's the Bucs that the Saints just played last week, then Washington wins it. And really what you have to do, because if you're Washington, you got to shut down Mike Evans. If you can't shut down Mike Evans, there's nothing that's going to happen. You know, you're screwed either way. It's going to be a shootout. So and the Bucks have one of the better front sevens in the NFL.
Right. They need to get after Jaden Daniels.
And if they do that, then there's nothing that Washington's going to be able to do. But Jaden Daniels is playing the best. I mean, he's Rookie of the Year. He's arguable MVP. You know, if it wasn't for the performance of, say, like everyone's talking about Lamar, and like Josh Allen, I think the MVP conversation should be Saquon Barkley and Jaden Daniels, because they've been just lights out for both teams, and the whole sole reason why those teams are in those positions that they're in. It wouldn't exist without the way. I mean, that's what we talked about earlier. Washington was a dumpster fire. You know, and they make a bunch of offseason acquisitions. Austin Eckler, they get Frankie Louvu, they get Jeremy Chin, they get guys on both sides of the ball, but they were a dumpster fire. Yeah. And Jaden Daniels, who again was a big question mark for people, they were like, is this guy going to be the true quarterback coming out of this draft? And he's played lights out. I mean, he's played ridiculously. Crazy. And hopefully it's not a sophomore slump next year. But so for me, that one's 50-50. It really is.
I think for a conversation we had earlier about quarterbacks having odd seasons, there has been some really good seasons this year individually for certain guys. Saquon is one of them. Jaden Daniels is another one. Lamar having a historical season.
Sam Darnold, I mean.
Josh Allen, say what you want to. Sam Darnold is one who's having just a ridiculous season. Like, doesn't even make sense. Honestly, I mean, I think you could arguably say he's playing better than his counterpart with Jared Goff in Detroit, which is just wild to even think about.
I mean, he's come back, in my opinion, he's come back player of the year.
Yeah.
Is Sam Darnold.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I would like to make an argument for Bryce Young, just because of the way that, going from bench to it. But Sam Darnold, for his whole career, to have this, that's what really hurts us Panthers fans to see, both Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold, leading teams to play, hosting, or leading teams to the playoffs. And,
maybe should be hosting if you're
if you're Minnesota. And because even that game, too, the Vikings, the Rams, I think the Vikings will run all over the Rams. I don't think that one's going to be close. But it's also Sean McVay, and it's, it's hard to count out Sean McVay. I mean, they kind of squeaked in off of a bad division this year in that one, where they had every chance to every team in that division had a chance to take over, and no one really could. And every team had bad years in Seattle, San Francisco, and Arizona. So I think the Rams got lucky to get in. I think, unfortunately for the Rams, that Lions game was the punch in the mouth the Vikings needed. And, Sam Darnold didn't even play a bad game. You're just going up against the Lions. What are you going to do?
So are we picking that game now? Sorry.
I still need to pick the Commanders game real quick. So I will say, I think the Commanders win this game, but I think, it's just, I mean, it could literally be a coin toss, I think, for me in that game. And it's just, I will say I was so happy to see Mike Evans get his 5 extra yards he needed to get. He's quietly one of the best receivers of all time.
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
Just crazy that no one's going to really talk about Mike Evans for as much as we'll talk about maybe a Jamar Chase or some of these other current guys, Amon-Ra St. Brown or something like that. But, he's quietly one of the best receivers of all time, and the numbers say so.
100%. Every quarterback. He's got a Super Bowl ring. It's multiple different quarterback system, whether it was Winston or Mayfield or Brady. He's done it every time.
Right.
He's first ballot Hall of Famer in my opinion. He just unfortunately played at a time where you had also Michael Thomas and Julio Jones in the same division as you. You had all these big receivers.
You can arguably say he's better than them.
100%.
I mean, longevity-wise, everything. I mean,
there was a time where Mike Evans was looking like he was going to be better, and Julio Jones, I think, still didn't before the ring that Evans got, could have said he had a better career, but Evans has played for one team, stayed on the one team, balled out on the one team, and done it, consistently every single year without Drew Brees or without Matt Ryan, to be there. And he was doing it with Jameis Winston, with even Ryan Fitzpatrick, I think, in his very first year, and then having Tom Brady, of course, helped out a lot, and then Baker Mayfield, but yeah, that one's going to be a toss-up. But like I said, and then for the last one, it could even still be a close game, but I'm still going Vikings.
Yeah, I'm going to go Vikings too. I think, honestly, I feel like the Rams could really, really upset the Vikings, but I kind of like what you said. This is probably the Vikings. Last week was probably the punch in the mouth they needed. And it would be interesting to see the Vikings and the Lions go back at it again, and possibly the Vikings win that game.
So, 2 things on that. Number one, obviously, still prayers and thoughts with everybody in L.A.
Yes.
And will that game even go down?
That's the big thing people are wondering.
Will they postpone it? Will they, they really can't. They got to play it. So whatever happens. Listen, I heard this the other day, and it hit me as I was listening to it. Sam Darnold. This is literally the biggest game of your life. Because here's the gist. You go out and ball out, two things are going to happen. Number one, Minnesota's going to be knocking on your door to bring you back.
Which they already should be doing.
Which, I get it. But if you go out there and you're 1 touchdown, 4 interceptions, and play horrible, two things. One, does Minnesota want you back? And then number two, what is the repercussions with other teams in the NFL who are looking for a quarterback?
Yeah.
Because if you go out there and you pull, a Kirk Cousins who can have a great season and then go in the playoffs and, choke, what happens? So I think, for Sam Darnold, and I'm hoping for him, I think the Rams beat them. I think the Rams are, like the Chargers on the other side. I think you're looking at a team that could quietly.
Yeah.
You got a quarterback who knows how to get the job done, has gotten it done.
Yeah.
A defense that can ball out, and you got your home field advantage.
Yeah.
And now you're also, don't get me wrong, it's like after Katrina with New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
How much do they come in? I don't want to. I was going to say it. They're going to come in there fired up. I don't want to say it like that, but you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I said let the city light the city on fire.
So,
earlier,
for me, everything, and I hate it for him, is going to. This could be $100 million ball game for him.
Yeah,
Matthew Stafford can lose.
Yeah.
Okay, the coaches McVay could lose. Got it. The other coach can lose. Got it.
I think regardless he gets a payday though.
I think he will.
Somebody will take a chance on him.
Okay,
and say,
but
hey.
see, like
if New York's going to interview Rex Ryan to be their head coach, they're dang sure.
I
gonna
know.
call, Hey, they're going to come crawling back to Darnold saying, "Hey, we were wrong. Can you come back?"
But
to New York?
as somebody who has a team that has the number 1 pick, would I want Sam Darnold as my starting quarterback next year? The answer to that question is no.
But the Raiders, the Seahawks.
No, I know. They've already said that Geno is going to probably be their guy again. But I know. But you know what I'm getting at.
Indianapolis.
But you know what I'm getting at. If you what the bet on this one. Yeah. How much does it hurt people's thought processes of going forward?
Yeah, I think it's more so on Kevin O'Connell. I think you have to make sure you. Like you said, this whole team is chomping at the bit, going, all right, if we win this game, we go back to Detroit.
Right.
But you got to say, okay, you got to get to the game first. You got to worry about the Rams first. You got to zero in and then take care of business here, and then you can focus on Detroit. And so I think that's the I think the thing for
it's a crux.
Well, the defense for the Rams does have ability, but their offense, is just. If you can get after, that's where, for defensively for Minnesota, you get after Matthew Stafford.
Right.
And you take over that one. You make sure he doesn't get out of the pocket, and you can have a chance there. But like I said, for what we've seen in years past, it's an incredibly even wild card slate.
Yeah.
Incredibly.
Across the board.
Yeah.
I want to ask you guys as we wrap up, for you all out there, I know you picked below, and I want to ask you guys as we also wrap up, who do you got in the Super Bowl and who wins? I think for me, I'll just give y'all a chance since I already knew the question. I'll give y'all a chance to think about it. For me, I think AFC Championship-wise, it's going to be Ravens Chiefs again. I think the Chiefs are by hook or by crook going to make it. I think it's just going to be a narrative-defining run for the Ravens, and I think they make the Super Bowl. I know I'm biased, trying not to be. In the NFC, I think in the NFC, call me crazy, but I think the Packers make it. Packers make the Super Bowl.
Wow.
Go ahead. Do you? I've got mine.
I think they lose to the Ravens. That's where I'm gonna go.
I mean, for me, it's the Lions. So long as the Buccaneers don't make it to the NFC Championship, because it was one of the only two teams that was the Buccaneers and the I can't remember who the other team that beat the Lions was. Was it the Chiefs? No, I don't remember who else beat the Lions.
I don't either. I'm blanking on it myself.
As far as I'm gonna look at it real quick. When it comes to the Lions, because for me it's the Lions. Like, right, I think they're the team to beat in the NFC. I think you're absolutely right with what it's going to be in the AFC. I think that's I see them beating the Bills. Oh, it was the Bills and the
Bills,
Bucks.
that crazy game.
Yeah.
Wasn't it like 100 points
it was
almost.
48 to 42.
Yeah.
So for me, I think the Lions, as long as the Bucs get knocked out, they make it through to the Super Bowl, and then if it's the Bills in the Super Bowl, then they get screwed. I think that, but if not, I think the Lions really, it sucked with the amount of injuries they've had on defense, but it's been next man up every time. They've gone and they had again a crazy draft this year, Montgomery, and there's a chance Montgomery comes back too. They're looking like, he was talking this past Sunday, smiling and laughing, saying he thinks he's going to come back for the playoffs. And if you're the Lions, you hold him until literally, I think, the NFC Championship game.
Right.
For the AFC, I think it's the same thing. I really don't see, I think the way the Ravens have been playing, Lamar's playing, like you said, I think for his title, for his legacy, to cement an MVP, another MVP for himself. And I think they are the all-around better team than the Bills are. I think the Bills have skirted by a lot this year. And even bringing in Amari Cooper didn't really do anything for him. Keon Coleman's not really performing the way they wanted him to. And their defense is in shambles. And so I think that the Ravens can overpower that. And for the Chiefs, they've gotten lucky every single week. I think there's even, I would be even shocked to see them make it to the AFC Championship in my opinion.
I agree.
Because, I could see if it's, they don't want to see the Chargers. Absolutely not. They do not want to see the Chargers. They don't want to see Jim Harbaugh. They don't want to see that at all. The Texans, if that were to be the case, then they'd be fine and win and go through that one. But I think that outside of that, for me, what I hope is a Lions-Ravens. That's America's game, is a Lions-Ravens Super Bowl, in my opinion. I think that gets the most eyes on it.
Supposed to be last year, but...
Yeah, that's what everyone was hoping for. It gets the most eyes on it. It wasn't the year last year for the Lions. I think it is this year for the Lions. Out of that, that other foursome, for the Bucs, Commanders, Eagles, Packers, I think any one of those four could make it to the championship game on the other side.
Right.
Whether the Rams or the Vikings win, I don't think it matters. I think if the Vikings win, it's really hard to beat a team twice in a season. But I just think that the Vikings. They've already done it with the Vikings, beating them twice in a season. So to beat them a third time would be ridiculously hard, but I think they would do it. Yeah. And so then outside of that, the Buccaneers, Commander, Eagles, Packers, any one of those four could be it. I'd love to see a Lions, Commanders, NFC Championship. I would love that a lot. I don't see it necessarily happening, but I think that I go Lions and Ravens, I think, is your Super Bowl.
I think the Vikings could play spoiler, too, in that Lions game. That could be one of those situations where the Lions look like they're clicking, and then they end up having to face the Vikings again.
Well, that's the thing, is that it'd be the third time in the year that they've had to play them and try to beat them, and that's very hard to do. But the Saints did it to the Panthers a few years ago. It's not unheard of to do.
I will go Ravens-Lions because that's what I think. I think the Ravens win. I think Derrick Henry gets MVP of the Super Bowl and solidifies himself as one of the greatest, if not the greatest, running back in the history of the NFL.
Okay, I like that.
I just think that, and for somebody who, you hate to lose a player, but I think we could all sit in this room right now, no matter what team you root for, and say you would love to see Derrick Henry get a ring.
Oh, yeah.
There's not a harder worker, I don't think, a better guy. So, Ravens-Lions, Ravens win it 38-20.
Okay.
Derrick Henry has a couple touchdowns, throws for one.
And, probably. So I will say, just objectively speaking, the Ravens play a different style of ball than any other team in the league.
They still
it's kind of
run. Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's tough to defend, I will say. Now, when they get in the playoffs, they tend to
but that's
what killed the Titans, their AFC Championship game, and that's what the
I'm going to push you back on a little bit, though, because I do think Andy Reid does pull some of that backyard ball. I think he does have some things where all of a sudden he's running things you're going, what did he just run and why? So I think that aspect of it, I just think the Ravens are better equipped to run where you're lining up now going, okay, what do you have?
Well, I think the Ravens the Chiefs are the last team I think they want to see, not because of the Chiefs, but because of Andy Reid. Now, their defense is a lot different, but if there's anybody that I've seen stop Derrick Henry, it's been Andy Reid. That's literally what, lost the championship for the Titans. They had the Chiefs on the ropes, and then they couldn't run the ball anymore, and it was nothing that they could do after that. And so I think the Bills...
Except the 1 year we beat them. But in the playoffs, when Marcus Mariota threw the touchdown to himself.
But the year that
I know,
it was supposed to happen,
the year it counted, and we were on this crazy run where we had we ended Tom Brady's
You beat Lamar in the first,
and then we
you
beat Lamar.
Yeah.
You know, they were the 1 seed.
Yeah.
And then you go to Kansas City and you're up 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you can't. So that's the last person they want to see is
Yeah.
Andy Reid. But and I didn't pick a winner for it out of Lions and Ravens because to be honest, I think that would be a toss-up game. I don't.
Oh no, I agree. Well, I just said 38-20, but
I think it'd be a toss-up game.
it'd be a fun game to watch.
It would be a very fun game to watch. I would. The other one, I'm also rooting for a Harbaugh AFC Championship. I would love to see both Harbaughs going against each other in the AFC Championship. With the Chargers and the Ravens. I would love that if we could get that. But outside of that, I think you're going to see. It's going to be Campbell and Harbaugh.
Yeah.
I think they're the two best coaches in the league right now. Outside of again with Andy Reid. You see the reasons why these teams are in the positions that they're in, and so it'll be really interesting to see who ends up coming out on top. I think it's going to be a very interesting playoff picture.
I agree, and I think it'd be interesting too, just to wrap up, how if the Chiefs are to get down, similar to what they've done in previous playoff runs, right? They would get down before and they had the talent to overcome it. But I would be curious to see if this year they get down, if they can claw their way back.
I hate to say it because it makes me just want to puke. But I mean, when you got 15, I mean, if you're down 10, and you need a touchdown and a field goal with 5 minutes to go, guess what he's going to do?
Yeah, but at that
He's
point,
going to get you a field goal and a touch. I mean, it's
at that point you had an active Tyreek Hill or Travis Kelce. Pacheco was
yeah,
doing all right.
I know.
And Pacheco's come back, done nothing. Xavier Worthy has been a dud for them.
Yeah.
DeAndre Hopkins hasn't been what they wanted him to be.
That is true. I will.
His supporting cast is
he was
not-
better at Tennessee than he was at
Yeah,
Kansas City.
And Hollywood Brown just came back. So
Yeah,
he's not.
Noah Gray out of Chapel Hill is their best offensive weapon right now.
Yeah.
Their tight end, and their defense is also not what it once was. They lost a lot of guys on defense. So
I know, but as Ric Flair says,
Yep.
to be the man, you got to beat the man.
You got
Yep.
to. But let's wrap up, guys. I appreciate y'all for coming
Of course.
by. It's always a lot of fun. I had to make it a big show for the last
course.
one, until couple. I'll do a couple pop-up shows throughout the off-season, depending on what happens. But we definitely hope you guys enjoyed the show. Remember that the Keep Prowling Podcast is on all major podcasting platforms. So we'll see you guys on the next one. Enjoy the playoffs, enjoy the off-season. Take a breath. I know Panthers fans, it's been rough. Okay, take a breath, relax. Next year, it's gonna be good. Next year's gonna be good. I'm excited for it. But we'll see you guys on the next episode of the Keep Prowling Podcast.